Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving headfirst into a really charged conversation happening right now.
Yeah, it's got everything comedy, free speech.
And personal relationships kind of getting caught in the crossfire when people disagree fiercely.
It really does. It takes these big sort of abstract debates and shows how they play out between actual people, people who know each other.
Exactly. And our guide for this deep dive is, well, it's the stack of sources you shared with us, articles, notes, transcripts. They give us a real window into this dynamic, especially in the Brazilian comedy scene.
So our mission really is to sift through all this material. We want to pull out the key insights.
We're looking at the main elements: alleged censorship, questions about hypocrisy, loyalty.
And just how messy it gets trying to navigate these ideological lines today.
Yeah, and we'll flag some maybe surprising facts and the core arguments from the sources just to help you get up to speed on this quickly without getting too bogged down.
Sounds good.
Ready? Let's jump in. So right at the heart of this whole storm, based on the sources, is the comedian Léo Lins.
Right, and the big event they focus on is his stand-up show being pulled. Taken down by a court order.
Yeah, and the sources say the judge's reasoning was essentially that the material was racist.
Which, boom, immediately throws you into that debate about the limits of comedy, free speech. Who gets to draw that line?
But then this is where the sources add a really personal twist. They bring in another comedian, Patrick Maia, and the main conflict, at least as Léo Lins tells it in the sources, is this alleged betrayal.
Right, so Lins's account is that Maia saw the exact same show before all the trouble started.
Before the court order.
Yeah, and not only saw it, but according to Lins, Maia loved it, praised it.
Called it marvelous, thing awesome, even said it was ready.
Yeah.
Those are the specific words Lins uses in the source material.
And it wasn't just a casual acquaintance, right? The sources detail this history.
They worked together on Agora et Tard.
Lins apparently did Maia a favor early on, playing his club, even though the crowd was smaller than Lins usually played to.
Right, just to help him out. And Lins also mentions, sort of offhand in the sources, that Maia once used one of his jokes without asking.
Which Lins says he let slide because, friendship.
So you've got that history, that background, the supposed earlier praise.
And then bam. According to Lins's account in these sources, Maia publicly sides with the judge.
Agrees with the sentence, the verdict, effectively calling Lins racist in public.
And that public turnaround, after the private praise Lins describes, that's presented in the sources as the real kicker for Lins.
Like ideology or maybe public image trumped their personal connection.
Exactly. And Lins's reaction, as the sources show it, is just deep disappointment.
He says it's not about just disagreeing, It's about what he sees as falsehood, lack of character.
He really emphasizes in the source material that true friendship should matter more than aligning ideologically or pleasing some crowd.
Says moments like these show who your real friends are. He mentions Danilo Gentili as someone who, in his view, stood by him.
And Lins's conclusion, reading the sources, is pretty final. He says he doesn't want Maia's friendship anymore. Full stop.
Now, the speaker presenting this in the sources, Ricardo Dias, he frames it very pointedly.
He does. He calls Maia's public stance a leftist betrayal, directly ties it to political alignment.
Which, yeah, as the sources present it, immediately makes you think, well, how much should politics affect personal bonds like that, especially when it gets this public?
And that speaker, Dias, he takes it another step in the sources. He brings up an accusation of hypocrisy against Maia.
Ah, yes, the older joke. The speaker points to a joke attributed to Patrick Maia, described as the Amsterdam, India one.
With a deeply offensive reference, yeah.
And the speaker argues, essentially, look at this joke. It's worse than Lins's stuff. So how can Maia condemn Lins? It's presented as hypocrisy.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to the whole situation presented in the sources.
Okay, so moving out from just Lins and Maia, the sources also bring in other voices, other incidents, broadens the whole discussion about comedy and censorship in Brazil.
Yeah, like the comedian Fábio Rabin. He's quoted questioning pretty publicly an 8-year potential sentence for telling jokes.
Seemed wildly disproportionate to him.
And he makes that point, which the sources highlight, that basically every comedian has jokes that someone could find offensive.
He even joked about, like, a prison full of comedians, right?
Right.
Trying to make each other laugh, the absurdity of it.
And then there's that incident with Rodrigo Marques. That's interesting because it shows censorship coming from that audience.
Not a judge, not the state, but someone in the crowd.
Right. The sources describe how someone got upset during his show about a joke involving colonization and mirrors. tried to shut him down right then and there.
And Marques defended it, saying comedy is art. He compared it to the kind of freedom you see in movies, like Tarantino's Django Unchained.
Dealing with tough subjects, yeah. So the sources use that to show censorship isn't just top-down, it can be bottom-up too.
And related to that, the speaker in the sources, Dias again, he has this critique of what he calls militancy.
Yeah, and we should note he uses a pretty harsh term, militontos. It's derogatory.
Definitely. He uses it for activists, or leftists as he sees them, who he believes are trying to impose limits on what's funny.
And the sources include a clip as an example. It shows a woman arguing with a panelist, Firmino.
Yeah, she gets really agitated, starts raising her voice.
And it's when Firmino just asks her, okay, so what jokes are okay then? What's authorized in your view?
Right. And the speaker in the sources uses this clip to argue that, in his opinion, when these individuals are challenged, they don't have arguments, they just get loud.
It's his interpretation presented in the material, suggesting a lack of reasoned debate on that side, from his perspective.
Okay, so this whole debate about who decides what's funny, what's okay, it leads us really nicely into another big part of the sources, the audience.
Who's actually laughing and why?
The second batch of sources you shared really gets into this. It shows this huge variety of online humor, but also, crucially, audience reactions, especially to the controversial stuff.
You see these clips making fun of modern activism, social issues, often highlighting, generational clashes or cultural disconnects through humor.
Like the skits contrasting feminist slogans with doing practical chores
or the non-binary pronouns versus old-school ID cards.
Right. Or someone railing against capitalism while using their Netflix account.
Or that aggro kills versus plant your veggies on Twitter thing. Yeah. It's very direct, often blunt humor, presenting these contrasting views.
And the sources also show other kinds of humor, some of it darker, some based on stereotypes.
Yeah, like that joke about racial profiling that ends with the guy admitting he did steal the stuff.
Or that really old clip of Pedro Bial, the TV host, making that monkey comment about a black participant.
Which got laughs back then.
Right.
The speaker in the sources uses it to talk about how much sensitivities have shifted, but also to ask about double standards, maybe?
But maybe the most striking part, certainly the part the sources spend a lot of time on, is this big compilation of Léo Lins himself.
On stage.
Yeah.
Interacting directly with audience members from minority groups.
Yeah, a lot of clips. You see people who are fat, black, indigenous descendant, blind, in a wheelchair, deaf, a dwarf, someone with fused toes.
All up there with him?
And the absolute key point the sources drive home with these clips is they're laughing.
They look engaged, they're laughing. Sometimes they're even making self-deprecating jokes right along with them.
The sources give specific examples that are pretty memorable.
Like the blind woman thanking him for inclusion because he makes fun of everybody equally.
Or the guy in the wheelchair wearing that provocative shirt mocking gender-neutral language, joking back and forth with Lins about politicians.
There's the dwarf joke, the ping-pong table tennis line.
And that really impactful story the source mentions about the woman with the hunchback.
Oh, yeah. Lins asks if she came alone. And she fires back, "No, I came with her," pointing to her back.
And the place erupts. Huge laugh, applause.
So the speaker in the sources uses these interactions to build a really strong counter-argument.
He's basically saying, look, here's evidence. Many people from the very groups his humor targets do find it funny. They feel included even.
Which, yeah, that directly challenges the narrative that this kind of humor is always offensive to those communities.
The speaker asks, why do we mostly hear from the offended voices? What about these people who appreciate it, who feel seen by it in some way? Are their voices dismissed?
And it raises the question, based on the sources, whether activist groups the speaker calls militancy truly represent the diverse range of opinions within these minority communities about humor.
It suggests individual reactions are way more complex and varied than maybe we assume.
And just to round it out, the sources also toss in a bunch of other random internet humor clips.
Right, the barber watching a fight, the dental student mix-up, the elephant chase.
And men imitating straight guys, the bodybuilder comparison, just showing the wide world of online humor where all these big debates are happening.
So, okay. When you pull all these threads together, you've got the intense personal drama between Lins and Maia, the wider debate about comedy's limits, censorship claims from judges and audiences.
And then this really surprising complex picture of how audiences, especially minority audiences, actually react.
The sources really leave you wrestling with some big questions, don't they?
Definitely. Like, who gets the final say on what's offensive?
And how much strain can personal friendships take when these ideological battles flare up?
And, importantly, what do we make of the fact, presented so strongly in the sources, that some people seemingly targeted by controversial jokes are actually in the audience, laughing and participating?
So for you listening, getting these different layers is really important, we think. It's not just about jokes.
So it touches on really core stuff. Free expression, identity, how we all navigate this world full of different, often clashing viewpoints.
So maybe here's a final thought to chew on, building directly on that source material about minority audience reactions.
Given those powerful examples of people from minority groups finding humor, even feeling included, in shows like Léo Lins's.
What does that tell us about the whole idea of collective identity versus individual agency? And what about the power of laughter itself? Is it challenging stereotypes, reinforcing them?
Or maybe, just maybe, it's doing something more complicated, maybe even both at the same time, depending entirely on who's laughing and why.